They had a camera hidden behind some plexiglass underneath the helicopter. As the bullet casings from the shells were dropping, they fell into the camera, and it's just beautiful, absolute cinematic gold.
Hello and welcome to One Cool Thing, a podcast from indie game studio De Fabrique, hosted by me, Hannah Nicklin. One Cool Thing is a podcast speaking with people in and around video games about one cool thing, not from games, which they're really into right now. We'll introduce them, their practice, talk about their one cool thing, and consider how it shapes how they think about their work. A chance to hear more about the practices of cool folks working in games, and hopefully somewhere where we can all reflect on how we make things. So without further ado, let's get into who our next guest is. So welcome Des Gayle, an extremely prolific British producer who's one of those rare folks who have more than quadrupled the typical game dev lifespan. With over 20 years of experience in the field of games, Des has seen some things. From working on the launch of the original Xbox at Microsoft to being the original producer for the Square Enix Collective and working on the first Life is Strange series. As well as being a BAFTA winning team member, Des is a deputy chair for the BAFTA Games Committee, a key member of the People of Colour in Play team, a UK-based outfit designed to lift up the voices of people of colour in the UK game dev scene, and currently divides his time between being exec producer at Radical Forge with his indie outfit Altered Gene, as well as living in Thüringen in Germany with his family. Des, welcome to the podcast. How did you feel about the intro?
Hello. Oh, Matt, you nailed it.
I was just saying to someone else that I've been researching people for some podcast recordings today, and you just find out that your mates are like really cool. I knew that you were cool, but I didn't know that you had 20 years of experience in the industry, or more, presumably at this point, because biogs online are always out of date.
Yeah, slightly more. What was it, 2023? So this is year 25.
Wow.
Yeah, straight out of A levels into my first games job, which was at Lego. Before all the cool ones, we trailblazed. We spent 2.5 years making all the mistakes, but some good games too.
I'm really excited for you to tell the listening audience what it is you've brought in. So what is the one cool thing that we're going to chat about today, Des?
The one cool thing we're going to chat about today is a film called The Matrix.
Whoa. Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What is happening to me?
The Matrix! Ooh! 1999's The Matrix, written and directed by the Wachowski sisters Lana and Lily. I am going to start off by hopefully stating the obvious that this discussion will contain spoilers for the 1999 film, The Matrix. Spoilers are plenty because we're going to start by just summarizing the plot between the two of us. Going to try and summarize it for people who might have seen it a couple of decades ago and not returned to it more recently. Key cast members: Keanu Reeves, just as Keanu Reeves was sort of hitting his peak, right? Peak Keanu Reeves.
Yep.
Carrie-Anne Moss, the main sort of love interest, Trinity. And Lawrence Fishburne, the key mentor who sort of helps the central character find himself and his journey. So this is a world where I keep on wanting to say spoiler. I've done a master spoiler warning, so I shouldn't say that again. Essentially, The Matrix describes a dystopian future where there was a war between people and machines. The machines won, and now people are tiny little batteries for the machines. In the quote real world, you are naked in a little pod and you're connected to a virtual reality, and the energy that your body kind of creates is used to power those machines like little batteries. Now you think you're living in a reality. It's obviously a virtual reality, and Neo, who doesn't go by that name, but I've immediately forgotten what name he goes by in the real world. Thomas Anderson.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So he's a hacker in the virtual world, and he follows some clues and eventually meets Morpheus, played by the wonderful Lawrence Fishburne, who says, hey, there's more out there than you realize, but you gotta want it. And he offers a red pill or a blue pill. And he has to choose the pill that will break him out of the Matrix. And so he does. And then he awakens in his gooey pod, right?
Yeah.
And then he's sort of collected by this underground resistance of humans who have been released or released themselves from the Matrix, with an immediate attraction to one of the crew members of this sort of ship, Trinity, played by Carrie-Anne Moss. And the war against humanity is explained. He discovers an underground city called Zion, and essentially it then becomes like a chosen one story, right? Where
pretty much, yeah.
Neo is the chosen one who's going to help everyone break out of the Matrix, and he has to come to terms with that. Your basic Christ, your basic Harry Potter, you've got to save the world, but that means like probably letting a part of yourself go in order to become that thing that you need to be to everyone. And then I think like the proof that he is the chosen one is because Trinity falls in love with him, and this Oracle told Trinity that she'd fall in love with the chosen one. And then they fly off at the end. I don't know. There's a big old fight. There's a lot of fighting. Bullet time. Bullet time is a concept that the Matrix brought to the world, and indeed video games, before Max Payne sort of, I guess, also did a thing with that.
Yeah.
Do you think I have summarized the Matrix?
Hey, you know what? That's pretty good. Yeah, you saved it with the fighting in between. Yeah.
There's a helicopter. He like runs towards the helicopter, and the bullets are flying, and
there's a whole bunch of cool shit. Yeah.
And it's just so infiltrated popular culture, so that like the Lawrence Fishburne martial art, like tiny little beckon with his hands, bring it on kind of thing. Like there is so much of that film which has permeated popular culture that it's even hard to unpick all of the ways, right?
Yep.
I just got quite excited about The Matrix. But before I ask you sort of to talk to us a little bit about your relationship, one final bit from me, and I really need to let you talk soon, Des, I'm sorry, but I think that we need to acknowledge before we carry on the co-option of The Matrix and some of its imagery by the alt-right, by the sort of internet neo-Nazis of our age,
right.
Because that whole like red pill, blue pill thing, which is the difference between those quote unquote awakened people who are now neo-Nazis and the rest of us who are sheep, is something that has definitely happened. But I do think that we can also acknowledge that the Matrix is worth like co-opting back, because it's probably one of the most famous works by trans writers and directors. And also, I remember watching I think the second film and thinking that the racial politics of the world that they built are notable in their time for the presence of Black and brown faces. Like it's a future which features Black and brown people, which a lot of like futures of that time don't.
Yep.
So I think that there's arguments to be made for bringing it back from the alt-right. So we're going to pop that to one side because it's not what you brought it here to talk about. But I just thought we should sort of note that. But okay, genuinely handing the floor over to you now, Des. Tell me a little bit of why you chose The Matrix.
So I chose The Matrix because it, I guess as I transitioned from doing a lot of, I guess, working for other people and sort of started creating my own stuff, as I was sort of like writing bits and designing bits, I kind of realized a lot of influence were coming from that movie. So I guess just in movie terms, in 1999, what they did was just incredible. Just having so many different ideas to use the camera. It just really is an iconic movie. And I watched it again last week, and that doesn't look like a 20-year-old movie.
Right. So I was looking at some of the films made in that era, right? As I was just trying to situate it in history when I was sort of preparing for this recording. And I think it really bridges an aesthetic shift, a moment in like sci-fi. So it's a 1999 movie, right? 1990s sci-fi movies, Total Recall, Fifth Element, Contact, 12 Monkeys. Now, if you consider some of the 2000s sci-fi, you've got AI, iRobot, Minority Report is a really big one, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think if you take out Eternal Sunshine and Contact, which I think feel more timeless because they're so grounded to like just humans and human experience, are less like the science fiction is less of a feature.
Yep.
I think that The Matrix marks a bit of a shift from like a cartoonishness, a bombast and overwhelm into like a sleeker future where the questions are more sort of philosophical than they are social political. Like I feel like Total Recall, Fifth Element, 12 Monkeys, they're all sort of about quite political. They're quite about the politics of the time and how it's been like changed by the technology. Whereas actually, The Matrix gets into this philosophy of identity and reality, right?
Yeah. And it's one piece that I pulled out of it was it's just about self-identity as well, right? You know, there's a couple of questions in the movie about destiny and fate, and you're just like, no, it's not a thing. Like, you know, I choose what I want to do. If I want to eat a Big Mac, it's up to me. Like, you know, and yeah, I'm not sure where I sit with those. I have my own kind of beliefs in life, but yeah, no, I think that's a great divide and a good way to describe it for sure. And I think as the movies as a whole, it just, I mean, story wise, it is a little bit not weak. That's not fair, but it's pretty vanilla, right? Like hero's journey stuff, right? I was like, all right, cool, sure. Yeah. But I just think how they went about it, just the whole thing is just great. And if I jump out and talk about the soundtrack quickly, that made me not respect composers and stuff, but like it just made me realize the importance of having a really good soundtrack as well. Because this is going to be really dumb to say, but I can't imagine different pieces in the key elements of the movie, and even more testament to the soundtrack, it got me to listen to music that I just don't normally listen to. So up until that point, I'd never heard of Marilyn Manson before. But the Rock is Dead track is an absolute banger. And then with the lobby scene, what was that? That was Spy Break from the Propeller Heads. And then so I started listening to them a little bit more. And like their album, Dex Drums and Rock and Roll, like it's just all killer and no filler. And just if anyone wants to have a look at that, you got to check out Take California and Velvet Pants. Like those two tracks are also very good. I won't talk about the story that much because I don't think it was anything revolutionary, but I just love the characters. So the casting was pretty much perfect. The agents, I don't know how they did this, but and it's actually a joke in the movie where they all look the same, which I don't know if the Wachowskis meant this, but I loved it as a reverse racism thing because often that's been a negative connotation used on me, right? Oh, you look the same, and the fact that Lawrence Fishburne, a black character, said that as well, like it just doubled down. There's something I did very much enjoy.
The great Morpheus. We meet at last.
And you are?
A Smith. Agent Smith.
You all look the same to me.
I mean, in fact, Lily Wachowski is really pleased for like new critical readings of the film, actually, because a lot of people, since both Lily and Lana came out as trans, there's been a lot of people sort of rereading the films as a metaphor for like transness and the journey between being an egg and becoming your sort of like full gender identity. And Lily Wachowski said there's a critical eye being cast back on Lana and Maya's work through the lens of our transness. This is a cool thing because it's an excellent reminder that art is never static. And while the ideas of identity and transformation are critical components in our work, the bedrock that all ideas rest upon is love.
Whoa,
Yeah, it's a good
that's
old
pretty
quote.
good.
Yeah. But I think that casting thing is also super interesting because I did a bit of rewatching again in preparation, and I just think something that's really interesting about Keanu Reeves's performance is that he does an extremely good blank slate. Because the
Yep.
thing about the being the chosen one is that you have to be all things to all people, and he mostly spends the film not pulling very many expressions and being a bit tortured sort of philosophically,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like, he has this kind of thing you can project onto him, this ability to invite projection, which I think is a really interesting performance from him.
Yes, that's an interesting point. I if you depend on which way you interpret it, like this could have slid slightly over into like a superhero movie, right? Like they could have cast someone a little bit bigger, a bit beefier, and I think like that would detract from the point you just made, right? Like you could really project onto that, but because he looks like a prototype, right? You'd be like, yeah, yeah.
It's just like the NPC guy or like the basic T-posed guy you get in some kind of asset set is just
Yeah.
like a Keanu Reeves in the Matrix
Yeah.
guy. Which is what makes a Matrix. I also had a quick look at Matrix. What is it called? Resurrections.
Oh, that's a shame.
Which do you know what? I enjoyed it because anything with like just dropping like what felt like half the cast of Glee in there, like Jonathan Groff and Neil Patrick Harris are in it. I was like, I don't know, I feel on board. I feel like they're leaning into the campness of the original from the perspective of 30 years, which is pretty interesting. In any case, I felt like Reeves's performance stands out there again because he has aged, but he's doing the same performance. Something about that felt really interesting. But what is really probably apt to us is the fact that in the new Matrix he's a game designer, and like he has all these little figurines, and he is himself in the game. And I don't know, I thought they were pretty good at representing game design, except everyone looked like they smelled nicer than we all probably do.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, we've touched plenty on sort of general themes about the Matrix, but I wonder if we could go on a little journey with you, like, and maybe you can tell us about the first time you remember seeing the Matrix.
Oh man, did I watch it at the cinema? I probably did. Yeah. And definitely the cinema, and I think that's just what made it a bit more impactful. I definitely didn't understand this at the time, but let me just I'll go on a tangent quickly. But Tom Cruise always talks about going to the movies, and obviously during the pandemic that was just horrible because we couldn't do any of that. But he was always talking about these spectacles, and you have to watch it on the big screen, which sure I kind of get. But then just because you've asked me this question, I don't think The Matrix would have impacted me as much as it did if I didn't see it on the big screen first. I mean, it's still a good movie.
1999, how old would you have been?
How dare you?
I'm sorry.
I would have been 19.
19. Okay, and that's a really interesting age, right? To go and see The Matrix. And also, like, set against, I guess, the backdrop of the world in 1999 was like peak, like, internet utopianism. It was the internet's going to change the world. It was the Millennium Burger's happening next year, but that's fine. We'll fix that. Like, there was a sense of, I mean, 1999, I was 15. So I remember that time as a time that felt like quite exciting. There was something about, getting towards the millennium and everything that could be. And I think it's quite interesting that this is not a film that's particularly like enthusiastic about technology or like the internet in general. It is a dystopia, right?
Yeah. It's a good point. And I think around that time, I think internet was kind of not available, but like definitely more accessible. I mean, you only need to go, 5 years in advance of that, where it wasn't, and modems were still quite prevalent. you couldn't use the telephone and the internet at the same time. But yeah, so we started to solve that problem. Computers were getting a bit better as well. It's definitely society wise, it's definitely an interesting time.
And so you would have been what? So 19, you said you went straight from A levels to working in the games industry. So that would have been in your first year or so of working in games.
Yep. Yeah, maybe. And not appropriate. Like the Lego games were, definitely skewed younger, so I couldn't really take anything immediately. And I think that's why it just sort of like sat dormant in my mind for a good few years. Because after that, I was working on sports games, so no application there. But so I spoke about the soundtrack, which obviously on a cinema system sounded amazing, and also a lot of the sound design was pretty good as well. You touched on it earlier, but with the helicopter scene, holy shit. Neo goes to rescue Morpheus from a high security building. He attacks it with a helicopter, which is awesome. But when they escape, the helicopter gets shot down. And then one of the most incredible camera sequences happens. So when he's shooting at the building, what they did was they had a camera hidden behind some plexiglass underneath the helicopter. As the bullet casings from the shells were dropping, they fell into the camera, and they slowed it down a little bit. It was, oh my God, just beautiful. Absolute cinematic gold. They fall out of the helicopter, and the helicopter crashes into the side of a building and has this amazing ripple effect as if it plunges into water. And then there's a really cool explosion. I want to say it was spatial, but I could be lying. But whatever old version of 3D audio that would have been, to double down on the camera, Trinity it just escaped the helicopter, and she swings towards the camera and hits the glass, cracking it, which is what the camera's behind. It's just an absolutely epic sequence.
I feel like there's something away about the Wachowskis use camera angles, which almost invites you to feel like they're flying you, the viewer, into the film. Yep. Like more active, more leaning in than a lot of camera work. Like maybe dynamic is just the word that I'm looking for, but that I can absolutely see capturing the imagination of a young game maker.
Oh yeah, it was such a good time for me to see that. And it's not just the action sequence. There's some of the slower narrative pieces as well are really well done. And yeah, talking about the dynamicism, sometimes there's a scene that I think any other filmmakers would have just been like, right, that's a static scene that happened, see you later. But they just go so over the top sometimes just to make it cool. And I think one of my and this is happening a lot now. I know the early Bad Boys films definitely ripped this off, but rotating the camera around a central point, and you come back to the Matrix, a phone is ringing in a shop, and what they do is they rotate the camera around it, but they also match cut it with it rotating around the team members in the ship in the real world, and then as they all load into the Matrix, they appear in the shop. It's just such a well done. Again, another good sequence, but another filmmaker would have been like, right, we got 2 seconds, job done.
Yeah, and just match cutting for the audience members who might not know is where you find some movement or item in a shot, and the next shot mirrors that in some way. So maybe you're going in a certain direction, and the next shot picks that up as well. Match shots actually I learned about recently because I'm editing a lot of trailers on my own for our game, also with the help of the team. But I watched some Derek Liu videos about how to make better trailers.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any sense of like how your relationship to the Matrix has like grown over time, like developed. Like, is it a movie that you often return to, or do you just enjoy having it as a sort of a concept memory that you relate to?
Great question. Yeah, I probably watch it about 3 times a year. Again, it's a very good movie. And that's testament to how good it was that I watch it again now. Like, and I don't do that a lot. Like, I've got The Matrix, I've got Collateral,
It's
and
like a
after that,
comfort movie for you then?
sorry,
Is it like a comfort movie for you?
I, I don't know. I
Or more
no.
of a like sharpening your like what feels renewing about watching it like a few times a year?
I think you know what I think it's definitely nostalgia, right? So every time um there's a remake or someone brings a game from an old console to a new one, and you're like, oh my god, that game was amazing, and then you play it, and you're like, oh no, it wasn't, and because it really it's not amazing now because we've got so much more knowledge to make video games and they're just better now. And in the 80s when I was a kid, like all those games were just bastard hard, and because that's what people thought fun was. Um, so I think it's a little bit of that. I watched The Matrix to think, is it as good as I remember? And then, yes, it is. And then also, and I think it's a little bit more relevant now that I've got a little bit more control over the games that I am making. Um, it's just remembering some of those shots that I want to replicate for sure. Yeah, a little bit reference, a little bit of just like, is that thing as cool as I think thought? And sorry, and then just go back to my list. Add Pulp Fiction to that. Like that
Okay.
movie is
Yeah.
just ridiculous. But yeah, those three I could probably watch. I'll never get tired of watching those. And then I think as I learn a bit more about cinematography and filmmaking, I I like watching it for reference and trying to see like, okay, cool, like that's what they were doing there. And I think I probably exhausted it now, but there are some shots that I didn't understand how they did. But now that I've got some knowledge, I'm like, okay, cool, right. And you try and look for the clues, which you can't really see because they got good editors. But yeah, you'd be like, that's where I would have done the thing. And if I think about a more modern reference now, I tend to do that with the Mission Impossible movies. And it's similar to video games. Like sometimes you wish you didn't know how the sausage was made because it pulls away from the enjoyment sometimes. And sorry, it's just fresh in my memory because I saw it on the weekend. But Mission Impossible, you're like, okay, cool. Well, that's where they did the swap, and that's where they did that. It's like, Des, shut the fuck up and just watch the film, right? Like, it's just, it's nuts.
I think anyone who works in an area of craft, the second that you get developed in as a practitioner of that craft beyond a certain point, you're always the mechanic who can't just sit in the car. You're hearing every little rattle that it makes, and you know what its insides look like, and you know how you might have done it slightly differently, right? And that's just like the curse of the craft practitioner, right? And you've led us really neatly into the sort of second part of the podcast, which is not just like why do you love the Matrix, but how it impacts you as a person who works within games. And you touched already on the fact that very often there are decades that can go by where you have very little creative control, like from a directorial, especially at the sort of the scale of the field of games in which you are working, right? So you've often worked at that AAA scale, or I don't know if we even had those terms back like when the first Xbox was coming out, but like high profile companies in which there'll be hundreds of people and there's a director at the very top. And you're there doing a very important but still sort of smaller part with less creative control. How long do you feel like it took you to have sort of I don't know, like an impact that you felt like you were making beyond sort of helping other people's visions? Like, when do you think your vision started coming into it?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah, Microsoft didn't care. EA also. Uh, uh, yeah, I guess. So after I left EA, so I went to work for a small indie company called Exient out in Oxford,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, we still made games for EA. So yeah, pretty much every EA Sports title on a handheld console, I touched that for 4 years, and EA. I mean, if we go to business side quickly, like they made all their money on PC and console, right? Like handheld was just supplementary for them, um, and it's they're $1 billion business, right? So they treat it as such. And I remember, I don't know why we did it, but we were making a version of FIFA on the DS. We were like, hey, we've come up with these new game modes. Do you reckon we could try them this year? And yeah, it's like, nope, just make the thing, update the roster, everything's good. And we're like, yeah, but we can do it in time. It's fine. And like back then when physical retail was still important, we had to meet deadlines to get it on the shelf, right? Because
Mhm.
making DS carts takes a long time, or used to take a long time. Yeah, we can do it in time. It's going to be fine. They're like, no, just stick to the script. It's fine. So, all right, fine. So we tried, and as you mentioned, like other factors and forces are at work, so we just didn't get to do it then. And then, yeah, I think the other couple of jobs after that were just do the job. Like, there's no sense for creative stuff, and I don't mind that. Like, being a producer, especially that type of producer, doesn't really super appeal to me. But it was when I joined Square actually on that Life is Strange, where I kind of realised, oh yeah, I love making video games, but I also love telling stories. And that's when like my creative genes started to get activated. Um, and fortunately, I was sitting next to uh, the narrative designer in the office as well, and we get on great. We still do stuff together now, and I think it's a little bit of luck as well, right? Because there's some egos in in the industry, and luckily he doesn't have one. So I remember playing through a build. I was like, "Hey, what do you think about this? I don't think the character would say this, or I don't really think, I don't think this scene works well." And yeah, he'd be like, "Oh, you know what? I agree. I was thinking the same thing." And again, something else that happens I wouldn't say just big companies, but some companies is a few people have the same idea. They won't say anything, and then it just never happens. So that emboldened me to start sending notes. But again, I was a producer, so it wasn't the hill I was going to die on. If it's something particularly egregious, I'd be like, "Hey, can we change this thing?" And I'll give you a little bit behind the scenes. So in in Life is Strange, um, oh my god, I forgot her name. Um,
One of the
Basically, it's
characters.
Chloe's mum. She works in a diner,
Oh,
and
yeah, I can do Chloe, but I'm not sure if I can do Chloe's mum.
yeah, yeah. So, and
Uh,
but yeah, they're at home, and she's making breakfast, and she calls her and she says, "Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey." And the first time I heard that, like, I literally took off my headphones as I turned to my friend. I said, "Hey, man, this is shit. Like, can we get
Do you
this
know
out?"
what? The writing of mothers in games really gets on my nerves because they're all like, "Hey, honey," and like, I don't know, just using a number of diminutives which feel really general. It's like people have never listened to their mothers talk or thought that mothers might be anything other than mother.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just like I'm sure some mothers call their kids honey or my love or something, but yeah, it's like there are plenty of like mothers in games that I just want to throw my controller at the TV about.
yeah, 100% agree. Like, yeah, but anyway, like again, to give you a clue that that wasn't that important. That stayed in the game, and also we were one step removed, right? Because we were the publisher, and Don't Nod did a great job with the game
Yeah.
anyway. But yeah, that I know for a fact that note made it directly to them and the writer, because I wasn't going to let that slide. But Jesus, Ooh, yeah.
I mean, just pausing briefly with Life is Strange, I think it's a really interesting point in your career to pause on with respect to the Matrix, because
Yep.
it's another quiet superhero, right?
Yeah.
Like spoilers for the core premise of Life is Strange, which episode 1 came out in 2015, I
Yep.
believe. So Life is Strange, the central character discovers that her low-key superpower is being able to manipulate time. Not a ton, not like I'm just gonna go back to the Victorian era. I shouldn't call it that because it's only really called the Victorian era in the UK. I'm going to go back to I know I have to remember what years the Victorian. I've just really set myself up real badly. So, yeah, she doesn't go back in time a ton, but she can manipulate moments in time to try things out differently and just like improve on things which are going badly wrong. But there's also a hugely cinematic backdrop for the game and its episodes, right? Like it has moments of huge that feel super inspired by cinema. There is like a huge tornado by the end and that kind of stuff, which just like I am someone who is healthily skeptical about cinema's influence on games. But this is a game that does it well. This is a game that understands why it's a game. It has a core hook and it really goes into that. For the most part, the narrative design and the writing understands it's in a game, and yet the places in which it borrows from cinema are really effectively dropped. And it feels like there's a lot of correlates there to the Matrix as well, like the quiet superhero, the kind of, you know, the manipulations of the fabric of reality, like all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, like so yeah, like we I remember we did get a little bit of criticism where it's just like, oh, looks like these people want to make a movie, and you just like, first of all, kiss my ass.
Can make what we like.
Yeah, right.
Lots of people seem to want to play it.
Yeah,
one of the most successful games of all time within its genre.
It just and so but with that, I think one of the big things that we did learn, because obviously with video games, it's all about player agency, right? But what we did with this, I say we, like, I had a very small impact. Let's say Donut. They allowed some scenes to breathe, and I think if they didn't love cinema that much, that wouldn't have come across in the game. And like one of my favorite scenes in the series, I think it's episode 3 maybe, but Max goes back in time, changes something for I mean, there's arguments to be had if it's selfish reason or not, but semi-selfish, I call it. Comes back to present and realizes what she's changed has just fucked up something else. And you're just like, ugh. So then she makes that hard choice to go back and reset it. And then when she does that, this is a spoiler, fuck it. Basically, her powers increase.
For the 2015.
Yeah.
It was long enough ago, friends. Almost a decade.
Basically, her powers increase, and then you get a new ability where if you can basically time travel through photos. And so yeah, once she comes back to the present after fixing her previous correction, there's just a scene with no text, very quiet audio. She destroys the photo so that she physically cannot go back and change it again. And I honestly, this isn't a criticism, but I mean, it's video games, we're running out of money, right? But we didn't answer that question enough, right? Like the question around, we have this power, like, should we use it for these things, right? Like, we didn't really dive into that. I mean, it's difficult to do, right? Like, and again, I've got another tangent here, but one of the best comic book runs of the Flash is Flashpoint, where if you don't know, and I'm definitely spoiling this because it's like 60 years old. Basically,
But spoilers for the Victorian era, because we spoiled when Victoria dies. Spoilers for 1999, 2015, and 60 years ago.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever this is. But yeah, basically, the Flash's mum gets killed. And then in the future, when he realizes he's got these time powers, he goes, "Oh, great, I'll go and save my mum." And obviously, this triggers a whole bunch of shit. He gets back to the present, and it's completely fucked. And also, by doing so, there's another guy called the Reverse Flash who's also messing with him, making it very difficult to do. But that's like the super simple thing, right? Like, oh, I've got this power to save my mum, so I'm going to do it. So, and of course, everyone tells him not to do it, does it anyway, and messes it up, and it's really bad. But like, just to clarify, in the comics, it's very good, and I think DC made a short animation about it that was pretty good. But like in the Flash TV show, like they screwed it up completely, and in fact, they don't learn that lesson. So the Flash goes back in time multiple times for selfish reasons to change things, and it always goes badly. That's why that show gets bad after season 2.
Glad to give you a chance to air those grievances.
Yeah, sorry.
they feel deeply felt. So like certainly here in Life is Strange, some themes of like the personal responsibility of having of being a chosen one, essentially, which chimes super like a ton with the Matrix, because one of the things Neo has to grapple with is like, I didn't want to be the one, and I just want to like hang out with Trinity and go on some dates. And I wonder if I should fast forward us maybe like a little towards sort of your contemporary practice, because we've done a little bit of your history there, and I don't think we have time for the full history, because again, as I said at the beginning of the game, you have this extremely storied career so far. But like now that you do have so you're currently working both with Radical Forge, but also with your sort of, you founder or co-founder of Altered Gene?
Founder. Oh, geez, just my very lonely thing. Yeah.
But you have a thing, it's yours, and I was wondering if in any aspect of your work now you could sort of, as we begin to wrap up, chat to us about how the Matrix impacts you as you think about how you make things.
Yeah. So I won't touch on it, but basically I'll only touch on it. I think over the last maybe 10 years or so, I've kind of been thinking more of video games, are they art, right? Like, and what that means to me. Like, I don't care about the wider discussion. And to me, that means like they are beautiful to look at, right? And I think along similar lines of, if you think about what's the film, Into the Spider-Verse, from 2018, where they wanted that to look amazing whenever you paused it. Like, I'm not saying I'm a trailblazer, but like that's what I always wanted to do in my games. And there's some great shots in the Matrix where, again, the more and more I watch it, I realize what those influences are. Like, you mentioned it before, where you've got the martial arts trope of the flicking the hand, like, come on, let's go. And even in the frame before that, Neo does the Bruce Lee nose rub, which is kind of cool. And then you can see the influences from kind of like anime and manga as well. Obviously, because you've got these superhuman movements. And that's like those bits of animation are coming straight into the games that we're working on now. Like, how they move is graceful and purposeful and a little bit exaggerated. And our games are stylized, right? Because we can't win the realism metahuman fight on our budgets. But and so that's because those movements are big and purposeful. That's going to work. What else do we pull out? I guess like some of the dialogue and the framing of the characters as well, right? We don't have massive cutscenes, but the few that we do have, like, they are composed very similarly. And not even just the Matrix. Like you'd be able to tell all the films that influenced me over the years with these stuff as well. And also, actually, so there's a really good shot just after the Agent Smith catches Morpheus, and they have that you all at the same exchange. And in fact, actually, just point about that. That was awesome because they do kind of look the same, but just their names. I feel like Agent Smith is just awesome because it's like the most basic they get. But recently, I found out the others. I thought they were all called Agent Smith because like that would have been perfect. But the others are actually called Agent Jones and Agent Brown, and I was just like, oh, that's brilliant. Where am I going with this? Oh yeah, so sorry, yeah. After he's just done that scene, he beats him up and then sends the other guys to pick him up, and yeah, he just stands in the doorway like in an epic, like obviously hits his mark in Hollywood terms, and just says, "Take him," right? Like just you're like, yeah, that's some cool shit, like some cool, and you just think as well, like it's a computer program that's absolutely cold blooded. It's just so good.
There's something really like, I mean, one thing maybe we haven't said is that the film was really fucking cool, like for its era, like. I mean, that's maybe the one thing that dates it is that no one wears sunglasses like that anymore, and leather is a little bit out. In some communities, leather is never out in others. But like it just felt really cool. And sometimes a thing that games can do is make you feel really cool.
Yeah.
Like just that moment of flow of mastery. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and we sort of need to get to like a thing that you want to offer the audience now. But maybe I will start off by pulling a thread out of as I was listening to you talk there, because you were offering a lot to us, which is super cool. But one thing I think, just to bring back to that framing you put at the beginning, which is like you're not interested in the our games are question, which is neither am I particularly interested in it, because number one, art, and number two, games are completely useless categories, right? Like just completely useless categories because you have to define both, and games especially is but yeah, anyway. But like I feel like what you're saying is what do you mean by game and what do you mean by art as a way of defining what impact you want to have on a game. Yep. Right? So to you, the particular things that interest you are things looking beautiful and the cutting and the pacing that you're talking about. And what you mean by game is that you want to offer that kind of aesthetic experience to a player, which makes them feel cool, which makes them feel at the heart of something like that, right? Yep. That feels like what I'm hearing you say. I wonder if you want to develop that or offer anything else really to the listening audience on what they can take away from your lessons from The Matrix.
Yeah, so from a business standpoint, I often get asked like, oh, how long's it gonna? What's the gameplay length? I think it's like the facetious answer is, oh, it's gonna be the length that it needs to be, right? Like because that is true. But what I liked about The Matrix, it is well edited and well paced. I'm trying to. There are a couple of moments where you can say, ugh, but like. Over 2 hours, it's
There's
a really
very little like fat on the bones, right?
Yeah,
it's doing everything it needs to do at the sort of like not even like MVP because that feels cheap. Like it's doing the essence of what each scene needs to do is done. The essence of each line that needs to communicate an emotional progression or whatever is said, but no more or no less.
Absolutely, and we used to say, you used to come a whole bunch of crazy shit, but all killer no filler was the mantra, and that's definitely something that I look at The Matrix for, because when I think about those slow moments, like those slow moments are the story moments, and as I mentioned, I think the story is basic, so that's why those moments don't appeal to me. So yeah, like definitely keeping the games tight, not being afraid to be like, okay, yeah, we're done. I think one thing I'll take away that we won't do, obviously, is exposition. Right? There's some things that people watching something just needs to know. Some films get it right, some don't. And as we already mentioned, The Matrix is there. Like I'm nitpicking now, which I don't want to do because it's an awesome movie. So. Again, with the agents, I like the the symbiosis towards the end of the movie, before the helicopter scene, actually, this is where Agent Smith is going rogue, right? Like he just doesn't want to be in the Matrix himself. So he takes out his earpiece, which helps him communicate with the rest of the agents, right? And what was awesome is the other two agents come back in the room, and you can see the transmission of thought between them all. So they walk in, one goes, "Oh, this is happening," and they're like, "Oh, he doesn't know." And then like the other one, and they both start to almost rebel against him and say, "Right, just order the strike." Like where he's like not in charge anymore because they're just like, "Hey, you're supposed to behave like us." Not the same situation, but in one of our games that we've got some triplets, which is going to make for a very cool but difficult to design boss fight, which is influenced by that.
Okay, so I mean, what I'm hearing there is, as well as the like, what do you mean by game? What interests you about the field of games, and then what do you mean by art? What is it about all of the things we can say about the world, or that we can construct as aesthetic experiences as well as storied ones, that grabs you? And then that what you just told me there is like, grab your influences liberally. Like,
yep.
Find what like really makes you sit up in the rest of your life, and that necessitates not just playing video games, but also going out there and experiencing, sports and TV and film and theatre and dance and experimental avant-garde art and all those things.
1000%. And and sorry, just to like sum that up, like it's just, for me, video games is my format / avenue to tell stories, and we've all got different stories, and it's all about like being authentic, right? And I think, I mean, obviously you know this, but the battle we've got at the minute as creatives who don't have infinite money is the people we're asking for money from are just like, yeah, that's cool, but can you make it a little bit more like this? Like the commercial realities of telling authentic stories are very difficult to sell in video games.
And that's a line that, if people are listening in their early career, that's a line you're going to have to walk your whole, like the second that you're in the bit of the field which needs to justify itself to people with money, you're going to be walking that line. And the line to even having an effect and being able to realize your vision for what you mean by art and what you mean by game is a long one.
Yeah.
And you've got to trust in developing your practice and saving up all of those influences. Like Des, you've been saving since 1999 and it's paying off.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Right, I should wrap us up. You may even have won both of us getting excited about The Matrix may even have won the longest episode so far title.
Yes!
Right from Under the Arms of Lacey Kane, who brought in being in a band. So you have out-talked me and Lacey. Like, that is accomplishment indeed.
Well, just to reveal my competitive nature, like I've got more. Like, can I make it so this is unattainable?
We keep them under an hour. That's our rule. All right. So I'm going to wrap us up now, but I'm going to give you a final opportunity to drag out this answer as long as you like, Des. What is it that you're making right now that you would like to share with the world? What should people wish list? What should they buy? And what socials should we follow you on?
Oh, no. Okay, so I think the one that you'll enjoy the most is a game called The Hellbrand. This is an action RPG, which is an alternate fantasy setting. That is on Steam. You can wishlist it. That would be great. We're working on some new visuals at the moment, so trust us. It's going to look amazing. You can follow me on Twitter at @kid_Desimo. I'm on most other things too, like Thread, Instagram, all that. You'll find me. It's fine. Yeah, that's it.
Great. So. And didn't you have a Kickstarter or something, or has that gone by?
Oh, that's done.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, like you can see on my Twitter profile, but like we made a comic book that is going into production in September.
So people can buy that in September?
We're going to start. So we've written it. It just needs to be drawn. But you can pre-order it. There's also a link on Twitter. So yeah.
Okay. Go to Des's Twitter, which is kid_Desmo. Is that
Desimo,
right?
yep.
Desimo. Okay. But it's going to be linked in the liner notes so people can follow the link directly there.
Awesome.
So that's it, Des. Thank you so much for spending time with me, spoilering all of history, including 1999's The Matrix. It's been an absolute pleasure.
This is fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of One Cool Thing from Die Gute Fabrik. As usual, rate, review, and in case you've missed it, although by this point I'd be surprised if you had, we're delighted to say that our next major game project is now announced. So Die Gute Fabrik has announced Saltsea Chronicles, which is a flooded world, brand new story-driven adventure game where you investigate a mystery as a ship's whole crew. If you enjoyed Mutazione, it's the same sort of beautiful design and animation and excellent storytelling, but it also represents a step up in storytelling ambition as you can play as a whole crew and you can explore many locations. I honestly believe it has some really sort of world-class writing and storytelling, and I'm really excited to be bringing it to the world in 2023. So wishlist Saltsea Chronicles on Steam right now. Head to saltseachronicles.com to find out more, and including like a little button you can click on that says Steam. That will take you right there. I'll be back soon with a new episode speaking with another cool thinker and maker in the field of video games. And in the meantime, check Die Gute Fabrik out on all of the usual socials, probably. Gute Fabrik, GUTEFABRIK is where you'll find us. This podcast was produced, edited, and sound designed by Tom Wally. Additional production and research by Una Min Kavanagh. Our theme music is by Nick Ellis, whose music you can find under the name Tenby on Bandcamp, TENBY. Stay thoughtful, friends. Take care. Goodbye.